Hello and welcome to another episode of the Mastermind, Body, and Spirit Show. I am your host, Matt Belair. Today's guest is a natural shaman, avid explorer, gifted oracle, skilled communicator, bridge builder, and ascension guide, holding a deep love and reverence for all life. She has traveled inner and outer realms extensively, retrieving sacred wisdom to share for the empowerment of all. She refers to herself as a blueprint buster, empowering people to understand the blueprints we are born into, while sharing guidance, tools, and techniques for transcending the limitations of our designs. She teaches the fine art of inner alchemy to balance all polarities within, guiding us to wholeness, self-awareness, and self-mastery. The natural world is her greatest teacher, and she has walked the grids and ley lines of the earth for 7 years, praying with water, restoring the song lines, and carrying sacred bundles for the indigenous in the fulfillment of prophecies upon our earth. Her journey reads like a great sci-fi adventure, sought out by many different groups on the planet for her oracle nature. She carries the wisdom of star knowledge and has been honored as a sacred keeper of this wisdom. She has developed relationships with the wisdom keepers of our times, from indigenous elders to quantum physicists, sharing her own unique voice to support collective awakening. Welcome to the show, my friend, Unity Grace.
Aloha. I'm so excited to be here with you, Matt, and all your listeners. I had a lot of friends tap in and go, wow, it's so cool. You're on with Matt Belair.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, I'm excited to have you here. You know, a little backstory for the listeners. I had the privilege to watch you speak at a panel. I had heard about you before that, and it's with my friend John, and so I got to hear some of the incredible things that you are up to and that you're doing. Some of the stories are a bit mind-blowing. And then, that Burning Man was very special because there was a really big Native elder collective, and they were sharing wisdom, and they have a lot of knowledge that's very not common knowledge, which I find interesting. So you're really woven into that culture as well, so you can share some light on all that fun stuff. So before we go into it, do you want to just give a little bit of background about who you are, like walking the ley lines? Like you're just doing it. It's amazing.
Well, thank you so much. It's just so great here, great to be here with your amazing energy, and thank you for what you're doing to bring forth all kinds of sacred wisdom and just share and bring the message out. It's really all about communication now and about everybody activating their voice. And I guess I'm just guided to jump right in that right now we are on this day in a super sacred alignment with Saturn and Mercury, right aligned with galactic core. And the way that could be described is that they are aligned with the core of creation itself, where we and Earth and all of creation came from. And Mercury is the messenger, Mercury is the voice, Mercury is the storyteller, and Saturn is the patriarch, but Saturn is also structure. And so Saturn has kind of this twofold personality. It's the old that's falling away, while at the same time, it's the energy to create the container of the new. And how are we going to create the container of the new? Through activating our voices, through every single person on this planet, rising up into the power of the voice, the throat chakra, to write a new script through sound. Because the first there was sound to bring matter into form. So I guess just a little piece about myself. My bio kind of describes it, but it really has been a sci-fi journey of the last 7 or 8 years. I went for a swim on a cave on the island of Kauai, and when I came out, my Merkabah was completely ignited, and I knew that my life had changed forever. And it's like a two-way broadcasting system started in my head, and it just direct downloads started coming through. Here's what we need you to do to help liberate the planet, to unlock the waters of the earth. And I didn't know what song lines were. I didn't know what grids and ley lines were. But the energy that was coming through was so precise that I really started to listen and follow. And so I began this amazing mystical journey that didn't make any sense to the rational mind. And when I listened to the messages, mystical experiences would occur. And they were the confirmation, they were the carrot that was dangled in front of me to have me keep going, to keep stepping outside of what my rational mind was telling me was crazy, and to keep following this path. And so the path took me deeply into the realms of the indigenous wisdom keepers on the planet, carrier of their sacred bundles, praying with water, climbing military fences, guidance showing me where the aquifers of the planet were, the guidance coming through and saying all we need is for humanity to say that we remember, that we're listening, that we're tuning into the elementals again, that we remember that bond between spirit and matter, that at the heart of it is the elementals, and that we have to restructure and reform our relationship with the elementals in order to bring forth a new earth. And so it's been a very mystical path. I say it's like a 13-part science fiction movie. And, I love to share the stories when they're relevant, but really what the stories are is inspiration for others to trust their internal guidance, to step outside the box. And the more that we listen to our heart, the more we listen to our intuition, the more we listen to our passion and what lights us up, the more we're going to start to bring forth this beautiful new earth together collectively. And really, that's what I'm here to support in every way that I can, for people to rise into their gifts, rise into their self-empowerment, and do this together. This is what we ship for.
Amazing. That's awesome. You touched on a lot of things there, which are really relevant, actually, because my friend Jay Campbell, who reads ferociously, really smart guy, and he's in a group called the Decoders of Truth. And this is where, people who are, looking at the world from, like, let's say an analytical mind, and they're checking out how our world is run, and, you know, you're trying to figure out fact from fiction, whether it's conspiracy or whatever the case is. So you get into ETs and these mystical things. And so in the rational mind, it's one thing, right? And you can get so far, but a direct experience, like, having your Merkabah open up. And for people who don't know what that is it like your spaceship? How do you describe it?
Well, it's a great question. Yeah, it's definitely your spaceship. It's your birthright home to the stars. So some people, or most people now, are starting to become familiar with chakras. So these energy vortexes that exist within our body. And, a lot of people understand what an aura is. It's the energy field around the body. And so when our chakras are not all working together, we are like a car or an airplane that all of its parts, its mechanical parts, are not working together. So is the plane going to take off? Is the car going to drive? So as we start to learn, everything in creation is mechanical. The spirit is the inspiration behind the mechanical. It's like the fuel for the car, the fuel for the jet plane. The mechanics of creation is what we're beginning to understand. It's what the wisdom keepers have always held for us. And if we come back to understanding the mechanics of how this reality works, and how our bodies work, and how our personalities, how it all fits together, body, mind, spirit, which is what all your work is about, then we can get ourselves back into the center of our driver's seat, back into the center of our car, our light ship, whatever we want to call it. So the Merkabah is the fully activated energy field that has the capacity to transcend time and space and operate interdimensionally. So it gives us the capacity to move through many realms of dimensionality. Once again, when the Merkabah is not working, we're very much contained in three-dimensional time and space. So this I always say, this is our birthright, the restoration of our sovereignty, which is our energy. It's like bringing the fuel, bringing the energy back into the center of the plane, the fuel tank. And once the energy is back in the fuel tank, then we can begin to ignite the engine so that the system can operate properly again. And that's what we're moving into, is the reclamation of our multidimensionality and the ability to be able to move through realms. You mentioned like ETs, and There's all these different realms that are simultaneously existing, and quantum physics shows us this, that frequency shows us this. Different frequency bands, a really simple way to describe it is radio stations. How can all those radio stations be out there coming through the same little box called the radio? Because they're just on a different frequency. That's exactly the same with all the dimensions around us. They're all inside this same box, just a slightly different frequency. So in getting our energy fields reactivated, it gives us the capacity to begin to steer and guide our ship into these different radio stations, these different dimensional realms, effortlessly at will.
Amazing. I love it. Yeah. Yeah. This is going to be good. Okay. So, the first comment that you made, I had so much to say. And so this is going to be a nice two-way. So when I was talking to Jay in this group, a lot of the conversation we're having was, he would say something like an archon or something like that. Not everybody would have general knowledge on that, right? Same with a Merkabah. Some people would know what it is. Some people don't. But the idea of the podcast overall was to expand your consciousness, to begin to, just to have a look and be a little bit more open-minded. You can still be skeptical, but, be open-minded. And interestingly enough, Dan Winter, his work has been coming up where he's saying that the elementals on the planet are upset with us. And this guy is a physicist mentored by Buckminster Fuller, who's going to be coming on the podcast. He has great YouTube videos that'll blow your mind, so you can check out his work. I've been through hours and hours of his stuff, and I don't really get it. I'm starting to filter through it. But I definitely believe him. And the other really interesting fact that you touched on right away is I'm reading The Life and Teaching of the Masters of the Far East. If you listen to the podcast a lot, you're probably bored of me saying that, but it's 6 books and you should read them all because they're incredible. But I literally just read the part about how it's explaining Jesus and these masters did the miracles, right? And he said, basically it wasn't Jesus or the masters. None of them ever said that. They said it was using the divine principle, like God, nature, source, the thing that's beating your heart, the thing that's making everything work. It's the divine creative principle. And then when they used the word, they connected with, what that word meant, like, so if it was healing, he's like, everything is already perfect. You connect with the absolute truth of the perfection of everything, and you send that forth. It's like connecting to the energy of the word, the real essence of it. And so it really got my brain thinking about it. And I was going to probably do a video on it because it talked about idle words, idle words and idle thoughts. And when we level up in these dimensions and we level up in our life, you can even see when you change your thoughts, you change your words, you change your habits, your reality is going to change. That's how it forms. But it seems like in the dimensions that when you go up, it happens instantly. And for me, I'm kind of like a person that can see and experience these dimensions, and I've visited them. And then I see people like you and I hear you speak and I'm like, oh my God, like that's a lot, that's a lot. But like, I think that she lives there and she can bring back some information. So I'm just going to ask her some questions and hopefully give me a little bit more guidance on how I steer my own spaceship. So I don't know if you want to comment on any of that.
Well, I'd love to, because in my very, very full adventure, I'm always talking about books that I'm guided to write, but I never get around to writing them. And one of them is Flight Lessons 101 and how to get back in the center of your mothership. And so that's a lot of the teachings that come through me, is exactly that. And I love how you said maybe she's going to these other dimensions and bringing back information. That's exactly what I'm doing. And each one of us is doing that for each other. As we have more expansive experiences, we're bringing them and we're sharing them. There's a little bit of a David and Goliath story here, because once you see the light and you be the light, there's a little bit of a factor of being that light in the sea of darkness. That's really the story of David and Goliath, is the light surrounded by this massive sea of darkness, and how easy it is for the darkness to swallow us up. And we're not talking darkness on a moralistic level. We're just talking darkness as in being asleep, or ignorance. Ignorance just meaning not knowing, not having the knowledge of. So each time we go and we collect something outside the box and we bring it back, the invitation is to protect that seed. Hold that seed like it is sacred, because everything around us in our daily lives, as we return to our quotation marks normal reality, everything in our normal reality is going to keep trying to reabsorb that piece of us back into the matrix, back into the darkness, back into the unconsciousness. There's an expression I use a lot: crabs in the bucket. And anyone who crab fishes knows that if you've got a bunch of crabs in the bucket and one tries to climb out, the other crabs will actually reach up and grab its leg and pull it back in. So when we are having these experiences, and a lot of the times, because I've shared some of my experiences, I've had brain maps that are shown globally that show that my brain frequencies have been in high gamma states for extended periods of time, meaning going beyond time and space. And when I share the experiences, a lot of people go into tears because they say, thank you, because you validated something that happened to me when I was 5 or 10 or yesterday. And I was just afraid to believe it. Everyone's telling me I'm crazy. No, we're not crazy. We're growing, we're evolving. Things should never stay the same. Nature shows us that everything is in constant flux and flow, as our consciousness should be. We've been in a container of linear lines that intersect. We've been like the dog on the leash in the backyard that's tied to a chain that runs from one fence to another, and it just goes back and forth and back and forth. We're very programmed by that left brain linear mind. And I celebrate skepticism. I welcome skepticism. I was a huge left brainer all of my life. And so all the scientists that started to bring forth the quantum physics, Nassim Haramein, Joe Dispenza, Bruce Lipton, all these, people who have broken trail for us, they helped my left brain get comfortable with these experiences that I couldn't justify with my left brain, but I knew they were real. So my invitation to people is trust. When we experience something outside of the box, go with it, hold it close to your heart until you become more comfortable, until you find the answers that help all parts of your brain accept your experience. And once you find those answers, that aspect of the seeking is let go, because now we can integrate and embody the experience, become the experience, and that lights up our DNA. DNA is all about light, and it's all designed to light up.
Amazing. Awesome. Where do I start? Okay. So I love that you brought up Dr. Joe Dispenza, because again, he was the topic of a lot of the last call, and apparently he's written a new book that is really amazing. And I was saying the story that when I went to his advanced, I went to his progressive and then a 5-day advanced, where you're essentially meditating all day. You've got brain wave scanners mapping out people there having really intense experiences that have happened to them, whether it's spontaneous healing of cancer or something like that. Then they measure the brain waves and they shoot off the charts. And so, I don't know what the numbers were, but brain waves, let's say, it was like 10 to 80 was the norm. And the max they ever read was like 120 microvolts or something. And I don't know what the numbers are. But then on his scans, they're up into hundreds of thousands, even millions. And so, they're not common experiences yet, but we are starting to bring back, this information. And I knew that when he was sharing the stories, he had more. I knew that his abilities were far beyond what he was sharing, because again, I've been able to visit these realms. It's like a little bit of a vacation. Every now and then I get to go there and I'm like, okay, cool. This is amazing. It's so nice to be here. It's so freeing. Oh my God. It's like the most familiar, loving, safe. Oh, it's just like, and then you come back and you're like, oh God, I'm back here. And then and it's, it's harsh at first, but then there's so much beauty and, love and creation here. Being human, we do want to be human, but holy smokes, it's a different experience. It's like intense, and now it's starting to become a little bit more commonplace. In talking about the gamma waves, we're kind of like you say, when we're in these linear lines, we're stuck in these states, and people aren't experiencing these states, so they don't have a reference point for them. So I think that, it's really incredible what you're experiencing. And I do have a lot of questions about it. I don't know if this one is useful. I'm just curious what it's like. Like, do you get to go there? Can you just go on command? And what is like navigating those realms like for you? And how much consciousness do you bring with you? And then if that's not a relevant question, but I'm just curious about that personally. Um, I'm just curious, what you brought back, the most important pieces from studying with the native elders, that people might not know, or because their culture is so different. I have a good friend, David Lombear Senapas, who's a native elder of the Mi'kmaq Nation. And it's such a different perspective, but they have such deep knowledge, like hundreds of years of information passed down, and it's mind blowing information, and people don't know it. And I know a bunch of it, and it's like a fraction of what he has. So I don't know if you want to chew on whatever you like of that.
Love to. I love back and forth. It's so good. Um, okay, so in regards to my own personal experiences, I say that from the time I was a small child, my first eye was wide open. So most of us have calcification of the pineal gland, and for a whole variety of reasons. The pineal gland I would equate with our sonar. And so all animals on the planet have sonar, and the human sonar is the most shut down. How do we know they have sonar? Because animals migrate. All animals migrate. All animals, coyotes, lions, butterflies, birds, whales, whatever animal it is, they always follow the same path. What is that path? It's called an electromagnetic ley line. How do airplanes fly? Anyone who knows aviation knows that airplanes fly in straight lines from point to point. And once they get to a point, then they follow another straight line to another point. What are they following? The electromagnetic ley lines of the Earth. So our sonar, our capacity to read all the dimensions has just been shut down. So it feels foreign to us, but we're learning to navigate. We're getting healthier. There's so much information now about decalcification of the pineal, about treating the body in different ways, feeding the body different foods, and so on. So people's capacities are tuning back in. And then the Heart Math Institute has done profound work with the heart. And it shows how the heart is the greatest electromagnetic field in the body, much bigger than the brain. And the heart has an intuitive capacity. So my own journey from the time I was a small child, my earliest memory was from about 3 years old, standing on the stairs of my house and looking at someone who had come to the front door and being fully aware that I was able to read their past, present, future, and their highest potential timelines. And so I just had this capacity that I began to shut down. We all come in with these capacities, and they're not nurtured or nourished the way that they are in traditional indigenous cultures. Lots of indigenous cultures recognize gifts when they come in with the children, so they're nurtured. So I always had that capacity. Around the age of 7, I really started to shut it down. I started to feel the pressure of life and the pressure of my own family's issues. And it was safer and it was easier for me to shut it down rather than feel. We're all empathic. Around the age of 16, I started to have spontaneous out-of-body experiences, and I had no idea what they were, and they were scaring me because they were so profound. And I was literally like walking through physicality. They were very lucid, and I was seeing things, and then those things would happen. So I shut that down. And it wasn't until probably my mid-30s that I started to have health issues. And I was diagnosed with a mass in my bowel. I had a spontaneous healing. I started finding incredible naturopaths on my path who started to open me up to my own gifts. And that's when the guidance started to help me go back into my childhood and see how I had suppressed these gifts. So then I started to access them again, really through meditation. Joe Dispenza is one of my great beloved mentors on the path. And I did quite a bit of his work, and just going back into meditation gave me access into massive realms of consciousness, of knowledge, of it's kind of like being at the center of the library for me. So I've never studied any of these things. I've probably read 10 books in my life. I don't watch movies, but when I have the capacity to access the entire library. It wasn't until much later I understood why that is, and we can bring in the gene keys and the work of Richard Rudd later. But that's how I describe it. So my experiences allow me access into vaults of the libraries that perhaps most people can't currently access, and I'm able to very consciously bring the information back with me. And that's why I share in any way that I can. We're currently working on a whole new broadcast, website, radio program, et cetera, my dear friend Sandalphon and I, called pureenergy.love, to start sharing more of this wisdom on a regular basis, because my blueprint is the oracle. And so it's the energetic that comes from the voice that's actually activating for others. Everyone is in the center of their own library. And as we come into our centered nature, something shifts in the frequency of our voice, and that carries a wave that is contagious, and it starts awakening everyone around us. And as everyone around us awakens, they start awakening everyone around us. So the voice is a really important piece of all of this. So yes, my capacity, I would say, is exceptional, and I'm very grateful to have it. And I understand through my design that my role is to bridge what is beyond with what is here now. It's a messenger.
Amazing. Okay, so I'm going to draw some bridges for people. I've heard and believe, anyways, that when we activate this higher level of consciousness, whatever the case may be, or some people's like when you die and you go to the next dimension, or you have more freedom, you can access all information instantly. It's like if somebody learned it somewhere in the world, you can access that. So is that similar to kind of like how you experience it?
Yes. And
Amazing. And
if I
so,
can I just say one
yeah,
thing about that?
of course. Uh-huh.
As we expand, as we're liberated from our personality blueprint, which the spirit is electromagnetically connected to something called a blueprint, a personality, an ego. So the electromagnetics of the earth are shifting, which is what is allowing more people to wake up. Because as the electromagnetics begin to become less polarized, the spirit has more freedom, more liberation to release itself from its identity with its blueprint. And so as that happens, we realize there is no such thing as time. Time collapses. And we realize that everything is simultaneous. And at that point, we release our memory, because we no longer need memory, because now, exactly as you say, when we die, we come back to the center of everything. We have access to all that is simultaneously. So we can release all these things that we hold on to that give us security, because our arm is long enough to reach any book in the library at any given moment. And we will only reach for that book if we are sourcing information that is of the highest potential for the collective in that moment. We don't hold on. We don't need to tell anything about ourselves because it's going to make us feel better. We're only going to access that which is going to advance the collective in the moment.
That's amazing. Yeah, what that makes me think about is Dan Winter when he talks about a shareable thought, a shareable wave. So the way the electromagnetics work when you're, it basically is your thought of highest good and highest service, or at least of service, and you're not thinking about how you can go and stab him in the butt and take his wallet or whatever the case is, and so in that realm it becomes much more important, and then it almost becomes like a law, but it's like a natural harmony. So I think that's fascinating. And the personal blueprint's really interesting, a take on the ego, and just where we have this identity and we really want to keep it, it seems. It's people are really fighting for it, and it looks like we're having more opportunity to have a little bit more freedom. I'm just curious, if you could, are there more than one oracle? Can you add on to some clarity, like for what that does? Because I'll tell you a fascinating story from my buddy Shore Slocum that was on. He was telling me that it was along the lines, I don't know if he said it on the podcast, but he met this person that you could ask them any question and then they would know the answer. And apparently there were like 4 on the planet. And my buddy Shore is like a friend, doesn't lie. And he's also done really interesting stuff, like meditate 10 to 12 hours a night for like the last 3 years and talks about some wild stuff. So, in my practice, that's not even a tenth as disciplined, because an hour is not, I've accessed some interesting stuff. So, I can only put 2 and 2 together and say, wow, like how many of those people are there? What are they doing? And can I ask them questions? What do I do with myself? How do I get more aligned? So that's kind of how that cycle goes for me personally.
A great question. Yes, there's many oracles on the planet. In fact, ultimately, we're all an oracle, because once again, I'll go back to this book, The Gene Keys. I might as well just hold it up for anyone who hasn't heard of it, by Richard Rudd. So this is about 64 codons in our human DNA. There's 64 building blocks, and these building blocks make up our personality. And so they all have certain archetypal qualities. And one of the building blocks of the human personality is the oracle, meaning that gene is encoded in all of us. Some of us have it active on our personal blueprint. That does not mean that it's not accessible in all. It might just take a little bit more work for someone else to activate that. One of the visions I was given of one of the installations I would do at the festivals was this oracle dome. And that tradition of people coming in to see the oracle to ask questions. And so that's how the premise of the dome would be. People would come in to ask the oracle questions, and the guidance showed exactly how the dome was going to be set up, and it was going to be a lot of white light and white dream catchers and white faux fur cushiony seats, and they'd be surrounded by lights, and people would come to sit with the oracle. And then as they were like being bathed in all of this white light and sitting in the presence of the oracle, suddenly they would come to that moment of going, wait a minute, I am the oracle. And every single person that would leave the dome knowing they are the oracle, because we have all of these gifts within us. The beauty of the path of what we call ascension is all about unity consciousness. It's about looking at another and saying, wow, those are super cool gifts that person has. I would like to know more about that within myself. So what do? We plug into each other so that we can learn from each other. We can share the gifts, and those gifts can be activated in us in our own unique way. They'll never be activated in the same way. But the purpose of ascension is to bring us into unified consciousness, to stop being afraid of each other, to stop being copyright, thinking that we own the wisdom of creation. It's for all of us to access. So as we plug into each other as puzzle pieces, as someone spends time sitting with someone who has the oracle activated in their blueprint, it starts activating the oracle in their blueprint. If someone has the digital library gene key activated in their blueprint and they sit with someone else, it's like that. It's like, what does nature show us? Nature shares. And when you see ants passing each other on a path, they'll always stop and they'll touch their little antennas. They're sharing information. That's the beauty of this time of unity consciousness, of us rising into this one unified field of grace, is to share the information and say, yeah, you want to know how to do this? You bet. I'll sit down with you and I'll tell you how it works for me. And that's going to give you some handholds in your own personal climbing wall so that you can start to go, oh, and then the moment you have that experience, you go, that's exactly what she was talking about. That's what he meant. It's like sharing handholds in the climbing wall so that when you have the experience, someone has languaged it for you. So now the handhold and the languaging that someone else provided click in together and you ignite that aspect of you. We all share the same DNA. We all have to work together.
Yep. Amazing. Love it. 100% agree. I always want to go so many different ways with it as I'm just absorbing all of this. In your perspective, is the DNA lighting up, or what's the deal with that? We're getting more. I hear all these different things. So what's going on with that, in your opinion?
Absolutely. Once again, Richard Rudd gives a great description in the Gene Keys. So the DNA is like a ladder, a Jacob's ladder, and it is structured to open up to more light. And so light is an expansion in awareness, an expansion in consciousness, and the actual biological, physiological chemistry of the body is to turn into light. That's why we see all of these religious paintings of the enlightened ones with things like halos or light over their head, because those paintings are actually telling us that we turn from carbon-based 666 to silica-based. And as we know, if you hold up a piece of carbon and you shine light through it, or you hold up a quartz crystal and you shine light through it, you're going to see more light through the quartz crystal. That's exactly what the DNA is doing. As we awaken and our consciousness shifts, we open to more light. And so I speak in metaphors. That's one of the things about oracle teachings, is they're all metaphorical. And the purpose of the metaphor is that they give people an aha moment so that anyone can apply it, whether you're 5 or 95. It doesn't matter who you are. The metaphor goes, that makes sense. So the metaphor that I use in terms of the light is this. When I coach people, anytime we're triggered, I'm like, thank you. The trigger is a blessing, because the trigger is showing us a fragmented aspect of the self. And if we project our reaction to that trigger out into the world, if we flip out because someone dented our car, if we are super sad because, something happened in our life or whatever, that's like spilling the energy out into the world. So the metaphor I use is that when we're triggered, creation is giving us a serving of light, and it's going to see what we do with it. If a baby is sitting in a high chair and you put food on their little table and they take that food and look at it and then fling it at the wall, that's a reaction. That's like us reacting and letting our emotions spill all over the place. If the baby takes the food and puts it in their mouth to nourish and grow, if we take the trigger within and we just sit with the energy of it rather than let it be a reaction, we're taking a serving of light from creation, like the baby is taking a serving of food. And by just being present to the energy of the reaction itself, that's the magic of inner alchemy. It's self-mastery. Every path of self-mastery knows it, whether it's karate or a ballerina who's the pro in the world. It's always about dropping the story that we attach to energy and feeling the energy, being with the energy, because this too will pass. And if we can be with the energy, we're shedding more of the carbon base, we're shedding more of what we're not, called the shadow, the ego self, I, and we're filling with light. And it's an actual physiological process, which all science shows us is true. So that's the metaphor I use with the light. And in every moment, we have a choice. Do you want to keep being the baby who throws the food at the wall? And then you're not going to have any liberty to feed yourself. You're going to be spoon fed again until you get it together. Or do you want to use this information and become the Bruce Lee of your movie? Like, just pick a master that you love and use that as your motivation and inspiration to say, that's what I want. The Masters of the Far East, the series of books you're reading. Let's get ourselves elevated so we can start playing with our true Spidey gifts, levitation, teleportation, think apple, produce apple in the palm of the hand. Let's get to the place where we can start playing with these higher gifts of creation while we're in physical form. That's where the fun is at, not dredging it out in the shadow.
Yep. Wow. Amazing. Yeah. Okay. Well, when you talked about holding the energy, I had a deepening of the understanding, because in Zen, they'll just talk about sitting in the flame, sit, you're just like sitting in that energy. It might not be ideal. And, originally I saw it as like, okay, yeah, sit in it and just be comfortable with the flame. But it seemed, like it was uncomfortable. But this way it kind of is like it's still uncomfortable, but it's it's shedding off the body, the physical form, the carbon, actually literally shedding physical matter, DNA, or whatever the case is. And I find it very interesting because it does go back to physics, and that's what Dan Winter is showing. I listened to his recent one, is like the physics of ascension. And in the Masters of the Far East, they're like, all of these miracles are just science you don't understand yet. This is all natural law. So it's just really, really fascinating. I guess where I want to go with this, I kind of wrote down a few different questions because you'd be a really good person to answer this. But okay, so I'll kind of rant a little bit. The one thing that it came up for me recently again was just seeing like the starvation on the planet and things like the things that are like people really, really suppressed. Sometimes that's overwhelming for me, just feeling really sad. It's just like, how do we, how can I, even with all the gifts that I have living in Canada and all the luxuries that I have, I still mess up, sometimes just do stupid stuff and have a podcast on consciousness, but then I'm not like, I practice really, really well, but sometimes it could feel like I could be doing a lot better, and then sometimes like, what about the people that are like, really in suffering? Do you have any like insight on that? Just like helping people feel good and like, cause I'll talk about empowerment, but how do I empower that being, for me, it comes back to, empowering myself so I have more power and freedom. Teach yourself to swim idea, then you can save as many as you can. But just curious if you have insight on that, because sometimes it gets overwhelming.
It's such a good question. My whole childhood, I started volunteering at the hospitals as a candy striper when I was 8 years old, going into children's rooms to cheer them up. I've worked with and volunteered like hundreds and hundreds of hours with humane societies and Oxfam and all of it. My whole life was, how do we help the suffering on the planet? And as well, getting really overwhelmed with the pain of the suffering of humanity, and then realizing exactly what you say is that in order to save someone, we have to swim. And it's why the Dalai Lama said the Western women will change the world. It's why Nelson Mandela and all the other greats said, be the change. Because the change resides within. And my DNA and your DNA are communicating non-locally, meaning if I change myself, it changes all DNA on the planet. And we come to this whole thing of the 100th monkey principle, and knowing that if enough of us focus on that internal change, that doesn't mean don't be in action every day. It means spend an equal amount of time evolving the self as taking action in the world. Matter, as Joe Dispenza always teaches, matter, you can't change matter from matter. You have to go into the higher etheric or energetic planes to change matter. That's how people have spontaneous healings, by going into higher states of consciousness. So we live in this Nike, just do it world, busy, busy, busy. And there's so much unproductivity in that busyness that is consuming our energy that we could be taking. I mean, you look at other countries, like you see in Thailand, there's like 1 million children meditating together or whatever. You see these things on the internet and you go like, oh my God, North America, we're just the worst, because there's all this beautiful stuff going on mass scales for peace and balancing the internal world every day. So this is what I say. I say, I don't care who you are. I don't care who I am. I care about who I be. And as I was really starting to awaken, I started to look at my actions and go, wow, like if Creator came down and told me that I had 5 minutes left to live, how would I feel about the actions in my last 5 minutes? How would I want to be remembered, and how would I want to remember things? And that's when I started to really realize that what really is important is, who do I be in every moment while taking action? Because I can be this action-packed person and a total jerk, or I can be an action-packed person fully aligned with source, knowing in totality that what is coming through me is of the highest. If I'm unconscious, then I'm not aware of what's coming through me. If I'm conscious, then everything coming through me is conscious, whether it looks like it to the other egos around me or not. So we have to make that reconnection with source within ourselves, such that we are fully consciously aware of what is coming through us and what we're doing in each moment. And that is going to change the world, because we know the old paradigm is falling. It is falling. We see it everywhere. I know from my own journey, which is taking me into the depths of the realms of some of the biggest players on the planet. I know it's falling. While it's falling, we need the imaginal cells that Bruce Lipton talks about, the less than 1%, to go forth and start creating something new. And the only way we can start creating something new is to first transform our relationship with ourselves and each other, and show up in every moment, not as perfect, just with the willingness to be responsible for who we be. And so on my own path, once again, my ex and I had a business together for 20 years. And when I was unconscious, he was the brunt of all my blame and my frustration and everything. And one day I was like, he's a really nice guy. I don't want to do this to this person anymore. And so I started owning my actions. And if I was triggered and I took it out on him, the moment I realized it, I would go back and go, I just want to let you know I was just triggered and it has nothing to do with you. And that was so hard at first, because the ego hates to be smoked out. It hates to be revealed. And I realized that this was my liberation, was my willingness to humble my ego in any moment that I felt I had taken an unconscious action. And I'm the first person in the moment that I realized something was unconscious to come back and own it, because it liberates me from an aspect of the self that is not conscious. And that's how we change the world. And in the meantime, more and more of us come to that place, and we become super efficient at creating new structures and new ways of being that will serve the 7 billion, 8 billion people on the planet, and help those who are below poverty line, who are just striving to get a meal or clean water. It is our responsibility as we awaken to be responsible for who we be. And then we will magnetize to us all the right co-players. Open from the heart. Creativity comes from the heart. That's what I realized with all the indigos that started coming in my life, all the 20-somethings. They were so full of creative ideas, and they were all heart. They share everything. They're like, there's 8 couches in the room and we're all crammed on one couch. And their heart is generating imagination and expansive ideas. And now all they need is support and finances to help bring these things to fruition, things that will help everyone on the planet. So it's happening and it's speeding up now. And we just passed a gateway, the 1111 gateway, November the 11th. It's very precious to the Star Knowledge family. I've carried the bundles for the Star Knowledge family for several years. They work with 11, 11, 12, 12, 13, 13. And so November 11th is a stargate. It's like if you look at how a time clock, inside a grandfather clock, things keep turning. And then they come back to the beginning point. You could say 1111 is one of those points. And as we pass through this 1111 this year, it's like much of the human consciousness has graduated into free energy. We're about to step forth into a whole new frontier. It's already happening now. So the more people that stay aligned and do their work with the triggers in every moment, be okay with the uncomfortable within, the more incredible and accelerated this process is going to take place.
That was incredible. I'm really glad I asked that question. I feel better. I agree with everything that you're saying. I'm in my own work and trying to figure out my own consciousness, my own life experience, my own service. I resonate with everything. That's pretty much the exact same way I feel. So it's nice to hear it outside of you and put in a very beautiful way. So appreciate that.
I should be
I want to kind of
asking
go
you the
back
questions.
Well, I wanted to ask if you have any deeper information on the 100th monkey effect, because that's something that I believe as well, and I've heard come up multiple times, is when a certain amount of people reach Christ consciousness, then all of a sudden it's going to ripple out, So I'm not exactly sure how it will work, but something along the lines of, say, maybe 100 people or 200 people reach Christ consciousness. Does this mean that everybody then just levels up instantly and everyone's like in it all of a sudden? And do you know what that actual number is? And do you know if there's any people that are at that level now? And do you know if Jesus is here? And this is a serious question for people who don't think it is, because I've heard that he is reincarnated back. I've never said that on the podcast, but I'm just curious if I heard about that from somebody. I was like, is he really? I was like, oh shit, that'd be amazing. I'd be super stoked. Like Bruce Lee reincarnated, like get everybody's got to come back, because, so it's like, you guys have really effed up this place. We've had to send back all of the Avengers because you don't know what you're doing. I was like, oh, thank you. Like, this is comforting. Please, help. So I don't know.
Well, it's definitely one great human collective of archetypes and stories. It's so much fun. So 100th monkey for sure. A simple example of is 100th monkey true? All you have to do is take a huge dam of water and put a small hole in it and see how long it takes for the dam wall to come down. The Berlin Wall came down in a day. There is momentum always building with evolutionary shift and change. 2 million monarch butterflies hatch at once. 1 or 2 or 3 or 20 begin that process by being the first ones to send out the frequency, the signal to all the monarch butterflies. And so then it becomes irrelevant who hatched first, who was the first Jesus, who was whatever. It becomes irrelevant because it's a process of expansion and evolution in the consciousness. And the most beautiful, prolific explanation I like is when single-celled organisms became an amoeba. They were producing, I think it was too much oxygen. They were going to annihilate themselves. They began to unify and form a greater creature called an amoeba, and the amoeba needed more oxygen. So that's the way the process goes. And what I've often said is this process has nothing to do with the shift in the financial system and business and money being redistributed. This is a grassroots from the bottom up process, and it's been happening for eons of time. That's the thing. Our little individuated consciousness can't see that, but this has been going on for eons and eons of time, building momentum. That's what the sacred calendars of the Aztecs and the Mayans and many others show us. They're time clocks. Why did the quotation marks conquerors or the church or whoever we want to call that aspect of ourself come out and look to destroy all the books of the Mayan people? Why are the 3 most important books of the Mayans in the vaults of the Vatican? Because they're time clocks. And for the timekeepers on this planet who have maintained that sacred knowledge, Spirit bless them for everything that they have gone to maintain that knowledge, because that knowledge and wisdom helps us understand where we are in the process of the cosmic clock, so that we can understand the shifts and changes we're feeling in ourselves, the shifts and changes we're witnessing around us, the shifts and changes we're seeing in nature, and so on. And so it's really a cosmological process, the Kali Yuga, it's all these different things are talked about in the sacred texts. We are but passengers in a greater vehicle that's taking us on a ride. And the joy is that we are consciously awake and aware to be feedback loop to the whole itself. That's one of the reasons we want to be awake for this process, is to be able to contribute our feedback from a conscious place to the greater creation that holds all of our consciousness together. Is Jesus reincarnated? I don't know. I'm an oracle. People ask me questions. I'm not getting a yes or a no on that. The guidance is going maybe. And Christ consciousness belongs to all. It never belonged to one being. There was millions of people on crosses. There was millions of genocides, fires, the witches, all of it, genocide after genocide, when the human consciousness was rising. Chile was a great example of destroying all of the artists and the poets and the thinkers, because what did that mean? It meant the consciousness was reaching a point of breaking wide open, awakening. Because when we get to the point where everyone becomes artists again, we're in the process of the greatest renaissance ever. And as everyone starts to express their story as art, because that's the final gene key in the whole human sequencing, the 64th gene is about turning the journey of suffering into art, leaving behind all of the walking through the quagmire and the difficult parts, and just bringing forth the gems. And one expression that's been coming through me lately, and I love it, is that we started off with the Last Supper. We all came together as these intrepid adventurers, and we had our Last Supper together. And then each one of us walked out on these branches of the tree of life, of this story called the human story and human DNA. We all walked out on a separate journey after the Last Supper to go on our own adventure. And now I say we're returning for the first potluck. And at the potluck, the only thing we bring back is the finest distilled dish from the journey. We don't bring back the wounding. We don't bring back the suffering. We bring back the wisdom, which is the jewels that we have gleaned from this long journey of the human heart. And we all sit down at the table of the first potluck. And this is the moment of celebration when each one of us is the embodiment of our wisdom. We are the master, we are the Christ. And we all look at each other and we're all lit up. And all we have to do is smile and laugh, because we all made it together, regardless of what timeline we walked or when we were incarnated. We will sit with all the great masters, because this human journey has been a collective share, and we're all coming home together. And one thing I want to say about the Jesus piece is, I say to people, We're not Buddha. Don't try to be Buddha. We're not Jesus. Don't try to be Jesus. Be you. Just be you. And let stories be written about you and your great hero's journey. Because that's what Buddha did, was walk the hero's journey. That's what Jesus did. And many others. And all those feminine names that have never been included in his story that we've been living by. So we're all coming home to this first potluck together. And will we see them? If we choose to.
Oh man, okay. Amazing. As you go on, I have things that I want to say, and then I have to pay attention because it's so deep, and then I just forget, so wow, yeah. Well, once again, I agree with all of that. I think it's very powerful and insightful. So I'm just going to load up more questions that I have because you just open up more questions, and I'm curious what you think. Okay, so they're similar concepts. So one of them I've heard, it's like there's only one of us here. Sometimes someone will write that to me, or I'll see it written someone and they'll say, there's only one of us here. Just curious if you can express some insight onto that. The second is simulation theory. That's really going out there now that we're in some sort of a simulation, stuff like that. It's really, picking up. That's number two. Number three is with Jay Campbell yesterday. And, they're more on the conspiracy side, and that's fine because a lot of it is real. Like most of it is. And there's a lot of horse crap, but there's like most of it is just actually that's the crazy information. You would never believe it because it's so dark you can't even imagine it. But I had heard this before, and it was something about like when your soul dies, that there was a net that they caught us in because the earth was in some sort of what do they call it, confinement. I'm forgetting the proper word for it, but they'd actually recycle us back in and trick us to come back. And now I heard that that is gone. So I'm just curious, in your experience, have you heard about those things? Can you confirm or deny? And I heard that now it's gone and we're good to like ascend, and we're kind of like removing these shackles that we had. And although we look outside and we have humans that are still involved in the old paradigm because they can't switch it exactly because they're not choosing to, they're just programmed, that's the way they were. But we have a lot more freedom on the esoteric spiritual confinement type of realm. Go ahead.
Great. Okay, great questions. I've forgotten the first and second one.
Okay,
So
the first. Okay, yeah, start with the third and I'll go back.
okay, we'll start with the confinement one. Okay, so I always start with the premise of there is no us and they. So actually now that cycles back into there's only one of us here, which was your first question. On our path, we go through different levels of consciousness. We go through, the me, I, and things outside of me. And then we start to shift and we go, oh, there's a relationship between me and that thing outside of me. And then we realize the thing outside of us is us, and so on. So once again, they're all steps in the ladder of of what awakening really is. And once we have the actual grokking of each one of these things, it's very different than how the mind can imagine it to be. So the mind will spend a lot of time pondering these concepts, but then we get the aha moment, like the moment you learn to ride the bike and you're changed forever. And these things can just kind of lead us and guide us. But the actual experiential of what they mean is always going to be different than how the mind perceives. So yeah, on my most amazing journey and adventure, I've had some interesting things come up that I never would have expected come up in my world. Dancing with those aspects of what we would call the cabal and military and so on that came out of left field for me. And so what I had already learned to do at that point, because I had become very activated, was realize that the power of love can collapse any possibility. And so I just started to learn that if I If I believed there was something outside of me, then I had the potential to empower it with separation consciousness, which is fear. And if I empower something outside of me going, oh, that thing is attacking me, then my fear is going to exponentiate its power to attack me from outside of me. But if I go, well, where the heck did that show up from my unconscious? Like, that's the last thing I would expect that's floating around in my hard drive that's now being projected outside of me. But if I just looked at it and went, well, that one kind of caught me off guard, but that's me. So where do I go to be with that part of me? I go inside of me to deal with that George Bush, Dick Cheney inside of me. I go inside of myself to communicate with that aspect of me and love that aspect of me and transform that aspect of me. So what you could say in terms of the whole, I can't remember what container theory or whatever the wording that people are using for it. What you could say is that human consciousness as one consciousness took an exploration and it started to imagine things. And then it started to think apple, produce apple into form. It started to empower its own thoughts to come into form. And then it was surrounded by all of its own thoughts in form. And then those thoughts started to, like AI, started to take on their own will and started to do things on their own. And all of a sudden, the one self said, that thing that I empowered into form is now taking on its own will, and it's not being very good to me. That is the way that I prefer to explain all of these things. Always saying it's all our creation, because that's the most powerful stand to take. If I say I'm 150% responsible, then I'm in the most empowered state to change it. If I say I'm 50-50 responsible, I'm giving 50% power to the thing outside of myself. And so, did we create a they that contained us? Quite possibly, yes. Or are we just a consciousness in a vehicle on a journey that's having different experiences that we can relate to astrological alignments and tell different stories that make sense to us? Yeah, we can do it that way too. There's a lot of different ways of making sense of the experience. But ultimately, once you tell the story and it makes 100% sense to you, then you can let the story go. This is where the whole thing of these few archetypal stories that religion has sold to humanity, that version of us named religion, like the story of Jesus or Buddha. So those are two limited stories of infinite potential and possibility home. If those stories speak to someone and someone goes, oh my God, I'm the embodiment of Jesus, great. Until I can say I'm the embodiment of the feminine Christ and look you in the eye and say it in neutrality with no, I'm the embodiment of, or well, I'm the embodiment of, but I'm not going to tell you because I'm too shy, then the matrix still has me. When I can look everyone in the eye and sit down and go, hi, my name is Unity Grace, and I'm the walking embodiment of the feminine Christ. The moment I can sit down and say that in neutrality, I'm liberated from the matrix. And so that was part of my journey when I was carrying bundles to Israel for the indigenous. The guidance said, claim your role in the play. Just claim your role in the play. Tell everyone you're the walking embodied feminine Christ and see what happens inside of you. And it was like, I'm not going to, everyone's going to think I'm crazy. And the guidance is going, yeah. And then the matrix still has you. So try it. So then I'm like, okay, I'm going to swallow my fear and I'm going to try it. And then I started to let that fear come up and work with it until I was totally neutral about it. And I could look anyone in the eye and say that. And then the guidance said, great. Now tell the people that you're the untouchable who cleans up the shit in the streets in India. And until you can say that in neutrality, or the cockroach that runs along the edge of the wall. Until you can say you're all of it or none of it in neutrality, the matrix still has you. Once we can hold it all in totality and neutrality, we're free. And at that moment, we walk in this world, not of it, because we don't need an identification in order to feel whole.
Oh man. Wow. I don't know where I'm supposed to go with that. This is freaking amazing. Oh, goodness. Well, it's like, do I have to talk? Can I just sit down in the grass for, let me just go sit down in the grass for a while. It's cold here, but it doesn't matter. Just gotta hug a tree. Know what's going on. It was amazing. I went through Sandra Walter's ascension path. I went through that whole thing, and it was really beautiful. And she has a divine neutrality. She talks about that as well. And I was thinking about it for myself, and looking at the levels of my own entrapment in the matrix, or agreement to play in that game, right? And those sentences are really powerful sentences to say. And everything that I read about Jesus, I have a book called Anagram Jesus that I've browsed through, but it's beautiful. I've read the Aquarian Gospel of Jesus the Christ, which is amazing. Autobiography of a Yogi talks about Jesus in a way that's aligned and pure and loving. It's all saying the same thing. It's like, nah, you are Christ consciousness. That's the whole thing. It's you as everything, as this embodied benevolent creator. And to step into that is that's the trick. That's the thing that we're moving towards. There's so many things that I want to ask you, and before I have this laundry list of questions that continues to just grow, is there anything that you want me to ask you, that you want to talk? Is there anything that's been coming forth that you're most excited to talk about, or is this working?
This works. It feels great. It's exciting. And yeah, it's great. Like I say, maybe I should ask you some questions.
No way.
We could
No.
reverse the roles.
We were not. No, not wasting that kind of time. I get to learn. I'm learning over here. I say to people, there's like levels to the game, and that's why, I feel like the podcast is my highest service, because I'm able to, in my, perception and feeling, is I can pick out the people that I think are real. I don't think I've made any mistakes yet, to try to amplify somebody who's not legit. And then we can all learn, because I'm just sitting here. And when somebody like the Dalai Lama, or somebody who like Tim Freak, who's been on the podcast before, just somebody who has done a lot of work and has a lot of value, I sit down. I have a lot of work, and I have a lot of value and a lot of knowledge, but as in the native culture, respect your elders so you can learn from them, and it's a blessing. So I'm going to just sit down and I'm going to ask questions as long as you let me. um, Okay, so I know that water is important. So do you wanna talk on that a little bit? I've heard some different things about water. Tons of stuff is going on about water. One of the things I'll tell people is to make sure you're drinking clean water, whether it's spring water. I've seen some really interesting filtration systems, but I know that your water knowledge is a little bit next level. So do you have any, do you want to wrap on that a little bit? What are your thoughts on it?
Sure,
Because you
I'd love to
gave
talk
me the
about
super
water.
water when we were at Burning Man. We were all in line for the super water. I can't remember the whole story, what you said, but even when I talk in the podcast too, that's why, like, with facts and remembering, it's like, you know, don't believe everything that I say, because my brain jumbles it up. I don't even know, it could be 100, it'd be like 400, and I'm like, sorry about that, but I will remember the important piece of information. And so when you were talking about the water, the important piece of information was, go get that water. He just said, this is like, go make sure you get some. That's all I need to remember. Everything else is going to get jumbled up. Just get some.
Well, the beauty of what you're saying is the beauty of the heart, because that's what you have a lot of, Matt, is you're very connected to your heart. And the heart skims over the surface, and we can have all the intelligence or all the information in the world, but the heart knows the shortcut. And that's the most important thing on the earth right now, is connecting through the heart. Information can be helpful, can be enlightening, it can change lives, it can save lives, it can take lives. But what shortcuts us out is our connection through the heart. And before I speak of water, what I want to just comment on is that idea of teaching and learning and sitting with the elders. One of the traditions of, the first peoples is to sit in circle. And the first time I ever sat in circle, I understood the power of the circle. Because in the circle, there is a mystical wisdom that comes through all voices that sit in the circle. And we remember that we are equal when we sit in the sacred hoop, and that no one is just the teacher and no one is just a student. We are all learning from each other. In a sacred circle, we can't hide behind our ego because all eyes are looking at us, and the ego is flushed out instantaneously. And in the sacred circle, we will be amazed at the wisdom that comes through the voice of a 5-year-old, or the wisdom that comes through someone who lives on the streets that maybe we judged, or someone else that we judged. We learn in sacred circle that the wisdom resides in all of us, and the way to access the greatest wisdom is to restore the sacred hoop of humanity, where we all sit together facing each other. And we remember that we're equals. And so as I'm joining you on this podcast, I'm learning from you. You're learning from me. The listeners are learning from us, and we're learning from the listeners. Why? Because whoever is joining this podcast in this now moment or in the replay is part of the consciousness that is informing us. We may all play different roles. Maybe some people talk more and some people hold space more, but it is collective wisdom that is being shared. It doesn't belong to anyone. And that's something that, I really like to reinforce, and especially with like all the amazing children coming to the planet now. And it's like, thank heavens there are schools that honor and acknowledge the wisdom coming through the children. When are we going to create these bigger systems that create containers where we sit down and we say to the children, what do you have to share with us? Because the children are so much closer to source, and they're so much less affected by the imprint of socialization. Let's give them space for more voice. Let's open up the circle so everyone's voice can be heard equally. And let's hold a space where everybody feels safe and welcome to share their voice. That's the most important thing to me on the planet right now, is encouraging all voices to be heard. Because even though, sometimes I speak a lot, I'm actually a super quiet person when I'm not being asked questions, because I love to sit and observe the wisdom in all life. If it's a bug walking by me, or, I was a landscaper for 20 years, I say that the bugs and bees were my greatest gurus. They taught me so much just by observing them. So there's the learning that's going on all the time if we show up with the willingness to be open and receive. And I just wanted to say that I so appreciate your wisdom and your heart connection, that you had the wisdom to see the wisdom that comes through me. That's what makes a difference in the world now. And that's what's going to skim us along the surface. One of the gene keys, the gene key of the oracle in the gifting frequency, is about heart marketing. It's about that we don't need leaders anymore. Everyone is leading themselves. And the things that will go forth to produce superabundance, this is what we're doing with pureenergy.love, are collective collaborations that come from the heart and that are designed to serve the well-being of all. Anyone who shows up with a willingness not to serve themselves or still needing to be on center stage alone, there's nothing wrong with that. But that's not where the superabundance is going to flow in this next part of our evolution. It's going to flow to collaborative efforts that are connected through the heart. And that begins with joy of being together, sitting together. So I just want to pass that back to you for a minute to, to just ride on that wave, because that's the new earth.
Well, I appreciate that very much. Thank you. And I 100% agree with that too, because, they say like children are the best teachers. And now that I'm getting older, I see it. And, it's something that I always want to remind my friends about, it's like, look at this, look at the way that they're acting, just, and you notice it. And, I think for some people, it's a consistent reminder whether they're living their authentic life, and then how important it is to, as you say, like, look at nature and just be observant of your surroundings. Because if you're connected with yourself and you have the it's not belief, but like understanding that everything is your teacher, that the universe is always speaking to you, then it's always speaking to you. If the universe is only speaking to you on Sundays in a hut with a bunch of other people, and only if you were good, then that's a different experience that you're allowed to have. And I think that nature and is the greatest teacher. And when you think that way too, when you ask a question, you look away, your mind and your unconscious and nature and everything is going to give you the answer that you want. So I appreciate that. And it's interesting. And I really love just this, what you added with about the circle, and I think that when I'll talk about the new earth a lot, and what does that even mean? For me, it's just like living in a world when I observe it outside of my own surroundings makes sense. We've gone from, we're out of this insanity. We're out of this fear everything. We're out of these low level conversations. We're out of this illusion and distraction, and we're back to what it means to be human, what it means to co-create, what it means to explore ourselves, the planet, and even other planets and other dimensions and things like that. So that's what gets me excited. And I think that the only way we do is we do it together, and there's really no need for holding on to that anymore. It's just, do you have the courage now to do it? And so I guess this is a good segue for one of the questions that I had lined up for you, which is, we're in it now. We are in oh, she's so cute.
This is Daisy. I'm staying at a friend's house.
Oh,
Daisy came for a little kiss. She's
so
giving
cute.
us 2 licks up.
Oh, good.
Like you humans are finally on track.
Yeah, hopefully. Okay, so we're in the 3D world, and I ask this question every now and then. Can you help, in a way, walk somebody out where they're in the middle of the crap, right? They're excited and they are down with this, but they don't know what to do because we do have to pay bills. I always call it sandwich money. I had some sandwich money trouble a little bit ago. I was like, oh my God, I got to sort this out, right? So my brain was like, where am I going to get this sandwich money and do the thing that I love? How does this work? It's challenging, and the way that I've done it has been very interesting as far as just finances and just doing what I love. I don't recommend my way, but my way is like all in. I just bull forward with my highest joy, and it seems to work out. There's definitely rough patches, I'm not gonna lie, there's like quite a few, but that's been my strategy. So for somebody who might have responsibility, or like, because it's kind of a twofold: waking up and experiencing more love, unity, self-love really, and understanding and compassion. So you've got that journey as a piece of it in trying to go the quickest way. And then also, when you're in a loving environment, doing something of service, but you've got this house to pay for, you got a family, you got these things. How would you advise, helping them kind of move towards more freedom and alignment within themselves while needing to navigate possible change if they're currently not extremely stoked on what they're experiencing?
It's such a great question, and that's really where most people are stuck. And just a little piece from my own journey. When I really started to, and I had already created quite a free existence for myself. I had my own business with my partner, and we traveled every year for four months, and it wasn't your normal lifestyle to begin with. But then I started to realize something even more profound was awakening within me and telling me to just like let go of all of it. So as I did, I started going on what I call walkabouts, where I would, go away for the weekend, and then I would be in such high joy that all these miracles would start unfolding. And I would just have to keep collapsing my belief systems inside of me that said, you bought a plane ticket, you need to go home, you need to do this, you need to do that. And I would just question, do I really? What would happen if I didn't? Because these miracles were such carrots dangling that were saying, this is real. Miracles are real and they should be happening every moment. So I really started to continually say, is that true, to myself? Is that so? It's a great question to ask ourselves. And as I would ask myself every time, I would go, no, it's not true. Who says it's true? So my weekend walkabouts would become 2-month walkabouts. And then I would come home. And those 2-month walkabouts had taken me through like permaculture communities and organic communities that were like that were birthing communities for new children, and working with scientists that were creating free energy technologies. And it just became like this incredible adventure. And it was everything I was passionate about. And so I would just keep going. And as long as I trusted and stayed in my heart, and as long as I have on this whole journey, resources keep showing up. Like it's amazing to me how resources keep showing up. And then because I started working with water, which I will share about, then it opened even more doors, because people would look at me and go, I don't totally get what you're doing, or really only understand 10% of what you're saying, but it all resonates, and I love your energy and we love having you around. Here's a tiny house at the back. Here's our car. What can we do to help and support? Because we believe in you. And then my closest friends on my path, when I would come home from my walkabouts, when I finally reached a point of knowing that I had come to a completion in my relationship and my marriage, that I was complete with the business we had together, that there was really, I needed to keep this momentum going. I didn't do it for me. I did it for the sea creatures. I did it for the trees that are getting torn down. I did it for the children who are starving to death. And so friends would say, like, we got to tell you, like, we're really freaked out by what you're doing, and we don't even want to be around you, and we don't get it. And I would sit down with those close, dear friends, and I would say, I get it, because I understood their fear. Because I had come into such a state of love that you can be okay in the presence of fear, and you can still walk your path. You can still choose it, and you can still sit with the fear, my own fear. But I knew from the time I was a little kid that I had come here to make a difference on this planet, and that the universe had provided me enough resources that it was a dead end for me to continue down that path of just providing a good life for myself. And so I would say to my friends, I get it. I know it looks kind of crazy. You don't know what I've been up to. I kind of been all over the place. I'm jumping on this plane and that plane. And I can't even really explain it all, because a lot of it's really out there. Scientists doing free energy technology, who knows what that is? And so my friends, I would sit with them and I would say, I get it. And so now I'm going to tell you what I think is crazy. Dropping bombs on innocent people in Syria, plastic islands the size of Texas floating around in the ocean, choking out sea life, sinkholes the size of city blocks opening up because of fracking in the United States. Like, those are just a few things I think are crazy. And if I have to look crazy to everybody else, then I'm okay with that. Because I know that when I leave this physical vessel, I will have done something to make a difference on this planet in regards to the things that I know are not right. And that's all I care about. And it really is all I care about. If I can bring my all to everything to help restore balance in relationship or balance in the ecosystem or harmony amongst all of humanity, that's where my heart resides. And it's the thing that lights me up. And it's the thing that brings tears to my eyes when I meditate. And I know it's truth and real. And that's all that matters. And so I say to people, ask yourself questions when you say, I got to do this or I got to do that. Is that true? And if I didn't have to do that, what thing could I be doing that actually lit me up? Because if we follow our bliss, we will emanate and radiate an energetic that is higher than those shadow frequencies creating the problems on the earth. And that energetic alone will start to bring change. And the momentum builds until suddenly you are on the greatest adventure and everybody wants to know your story. And how are you doing it? And how are you doing it? By following love, the things that you love and the things that light you up the most, and just stay there. Even when the fear comes. And when my greatest fears would come up and I would go like, oh my God, my bank account, my this, my that, I shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be climbing these military fences, blah, blah, blah. I would just sit and embrace the discomfort of that energy. Just sit with the fear, sit with the oppression. And this too passed. And I would be liberated once again. And I would just be like on a higher and higher frequency. And that's how I've done this journey. It's that simple. Even though it doesn't feel simple, face your first fear, then your next fear, then your next fear. Instead of running from it, denying it, using some habitual thing to push it down, all of our habits, all of our addictions, eventually those things will bring us to some kind of crisis. So why wait until the crisis comes? Just find the thing we love the most now and do it. And that's what's going to make the world a better place.
Wow. Another ridiculously extraordinary answer. Well, in the middle of it, it's like if I say anything, I'm just going to ruin it. just again, just need to go sit out in the grass again. Is it's so spot on. I can say for me, I've had a pretty epic life experience so far, and that's the exact same way that I did it. And I think that the important thing is when people ask me those questions, we're having a real conversation, I want to have a real life made by me. I want to test myself, and I'm, rather than living in fear of all the things that could happen, because they could happen, and I've been in spaces where it was challenging, and in the way that you phrased it, I really liked, because it's like you go over this hurdle, but you also get it as a chip, you know what I mean? As a character development, you learn that you did that and you know who you are. And the most important thing I think that you touched on is really being real with yourself, because for me, I shared this experience. I've had a few near-death experiences. One recently in Sedona with my girlfriend, and we got caught on this really sketchy spot through a stupid move, and all of a sudden it was in a really bad situation. And for me to get down, I had to relax and then basically face my death, because I was properly effed, and it would have not been good. It was so bad, and I couldn't believe that even happened. And so in that process, I had to go through my death, and when I did, the thought that came to my mind was, I guess my work is done. I wasn't afraid. I didn't go through regrets, and it was a real death process. I've done shamanic death rituals, which I highly recommend. And so that felt really good, because I know that I'm trying my best. It's not perfect. It's very ugly, and it's tons of mistakes and all kinds of crap. But, I know that I'm doing my best, and I'm focusing on what actually matters. And if people stop focusing on their illusions, both outside and 100% inside of all those stories that everybody told you were true. Everything that you needed to be and everything you're supposed to, and how society works, and this is just the way it is. I believe that, we had very specific, very intelligent programming from education, from TV, from influence to make us believe all these things. And now you have an opportunity to let that go. So through your own awareness and through your own consciousness, you can let that go, because when you do eat it and you leave your vessel, what's more frightening than running out of money? And I'm Canadian. I just watched the Jim Carrey show the other day. It was so good. He's like, most people don't know this. My my family lost his job, so we were homeless for 3 years. But I'm Canadian, so I just thought we were camping. And so, you know, really the fear of being a Canadian and having two arms and two legs and some common sense, I can figure it out, you know? And so I would rather deal with that fear of figuring it out and maybe doing a job that I don't want for a bit until I sort it out again, than the absolutely traumatizing realization that you could see all of this suffering on the planet. You had the power to make a difference. You had the free will conscious choice to live your life however you wanted. You had that the whole time. There was nobody that was forcing you to do anything. You impose that on yourself. For whatever story you tell yourself, that's up to you. But at that moment, you're going to recognize that lie. And that's the midlife crisis. That's those other things. So why not recognize that now? Step out now, because we need it. The world needs it. The world, just open heart, whatever you love to do, what makes a difference to you in your way, just start with that energy, and you will make a difference. And you'll ultimately make a difference to yourself. And if you just even want to go on the ego side of it, it's kind of like skateboarding. It's consciousness and being loving and cooperative will be cool and trendy. So if you do it now, you're going to be trendier than your friends who wake up in a year or 2 years. So you can think about that now and just go all in just for that reason alone, because it's happening. It's already here. So just get right in the front, get into it, and we'll welcome you. You know what I mean? And if you do accept, you're probably going to have to sort out your own baloney, because that's the way it's going to go. But, however we get you involved, I'll take it. So that's my rant on that.
That is beautifully put, and you're exactly right. Everyone is welcome. That's why the more of us that hold the container in this joy and love and play and coming from the heart, the stronger it's going to get. It's like one of the metaphors that I use. Everybody get your ass in the canoe. We're all going home together. Every single one on the planet, doesn't matter what role in the play you had, it's okay. All is forgiven. Just get in the canoe. And the guidance was saying the other day, all right, we have everyone in the canoe. Now get the canoe moving. We have to get some momentum so nobody falls out again. And that's the coming together with like minds, like spirits, and playing and bringing our all to the table. This is the piece about the no copyright. I just show up with everything I have. And it's all for sharing. And if others show up with everything they have, all the things that they're really good at, their gifts and their skills and the domain names and the money and the whatever, anything we have, I got some groceries. That is what is going to create this container. And then people who are completely responsible in every moment for who we be. Doesn't mean be perfect, like you say. It just means own it. Just own it, and own it in the moment, so that the wave doesn't have to carry out for another 2 days, 2 weeks, 3 months. Let's just own it and keep moving and smiling and laughing. The Hopi prophecy says, take nothing personally at this time, most of all ourselves. For as soon as we do, we'll halt our spiritual evolution. They're telling us our blueprint is falling away. Our ego is falling away. It's a role in the play. It's all mechanical. Everything that we've identified ourselves to be is actually a mechanical process. And how do we know that? The first time I ever read the Gene Keys, I went like, what? This describes me to a T. How can this be? And then I was insulted. I was offended, and my spirit was angry, going, you mean to tell me I'm just a program? And I could see it. I could see the mechanics of everything I had identified with was a program, mechanical. And then for a while, it was like I got really depressed, going like, oh, I'm stuck in this blueprint. I'm stuck in this vehicle. And then it was like, no, I'm not. And that's when the guidance kept saying, claim your role in the play. Just go for your role in the play. Go for the Academy Award. Learn your script again so that you can be inside of it with no identity. That's the neutrality. And suddenly the blueprint becomes your best friend because it activates to the higher levels of its capacity. And suddenly your Volkswagen vehicle, your Volkswagen Bug, became a light ship because your energy changes from the inside out. Your aura shifts from the inside out. And suddenly you are the master that you read about that inspired you. I love your sharing. It's beautiful sharing. And that shamanic process, like you say, it's good to learn shamanic processes, however people do it, to come to that place of understanding the death process and to experience the consciousness in it, that it's always existing in these different forms and states. So while we're here, let's use this physicality to turn this into the garden it was meant to be.
Incredible. Oh man, yeah, I love it again. So good. I love the boat thing too. And the thing is, when we cooperate, it just makes sense, Start working together. I consistently say Team Earth, a hashtag Team Earth, just imagine one solar system over, you got another Earth, right? And they start working together, and we have like the Olympics, Galactic Olympics, they're going to whoop our butt, If we team up, we are going to kick ass. Let's start cooperating and taking these things out. And we don't need the governments to do it. They are obsolete. It's never going to be them. It's never going to be. Just call a person on the other side, cooperate with them with wherever they are, and you've already done it. Scientists, especially people with, well, and not that science, anybody, just anybody doing anything good, just cooperate with someone else, and then go in there with an open, loving heart, and it's going to shift incredibly fast with that idea. And the more of us do it, then we have a collective of 8 or 12 smart people doing it, and then another collective, and now you got 24, because they're just going to cooperate, and then they're just going to cooperate, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, it's tipped over and the dam is burst. So I see it with the ability to happen lightning fast. We've covered so many incredible topics, and I'd love to go forever. One of the things that I didn't touch on, I know that's going to be coming down the pipe, is there's so much information and misinformation and confusion around multidimensional beings, aliens. Do they exist? Are they evil? Do they come? Is there going to be disclosure coming? Is that going to happen? Are they already here? Is the Earth hollow? I don't know. I know I've seen a few ships. I think that they're going on. I'm pretty confident. I've seen some messed up stuff. Just curious if you wanted to give some insight into that whole realm. So if somebody's never heard it or is new to it, how do you see that playing out in the experience of our connection with a galactic heritage, if that's the sense, or it's all nonsense, or what do you think?
It's such a great question. And, the metaphor that comes to mind when you ask it is like this. So let's say that you love snorkeling. And so you've been snorkeling along the reefs of Kauai for a long time, and you see all these great fish and stuff. And then someone comes along and says, hey, do you want to learn to scuba dive? So what is about to happen for the collective consciousness more and more? There's the expression of lifting of the veils or contact or all these different things. It's just like someone coming along and saying, hey, do you want to learn to scuba dive and see something new and see more? And so we're learning to scuba dive. We're going to go deeper into the field of the Akash of life. There is more life out there than we're aware of. And in fact, there's more life within us than we're aware of. There's more life on this planet than we're aware of. And, many years ago, I was in an event with the Resonance Project, and Nassim Haramein was saying, like, your star nations are all here, and they have a picture of you on the fridge, and they want you to call them in. And so that night at the event, it was in Palm Desert, and a bunch of people were walking around in the desert and like looking up and calling in their star nations. And that's when I ended up meeting a bunch of indigo kids who became very close to me, and it was like my star nations right here on the earth. And the next morning, I used to get up really early and meditate outside every morning. And I went out into this dry river valley, and I was just journaling before I went into my meditation. And suddenly I heard right beside my ear a woof. And I looked up, and it was a coyote right by my face. And I jumped up surprised, and I realized there was 2 more coyotes right around me. And so I had this moment, and the guidance came in and said, breathe and sit back down. If you want to meet your star nations out there, get to know your human family better first. Because how are you going to open to all these dimensional realms unless you can sit here with these beautiful animals in stillness and trust and love? And so I sat back down, and the coyotes for 10 minutes just ran around me. And they would like move in. There was nothing aggressive. They were super curious, and they would kind of like dart in and like take a sniff of me and then just move back out. And the circle was like maybe 10 feet at the most. And it was just such a profound moment for me of surrender, of going, yeah, I definitely want to get to know all these beings on earth before I start seeking anything else. Look at all the life forms here on earth right now. And so we have this dream of going to the stars. What if all those life forms are actually right here, right now? And it's just like the radio station and tuning them in. And how do I get better at tuning them in? By getting stiller within me. So I'm putting out less of a singular frequency, a singular radio station. And in my stillness, can connect into more radio stations. There's all kinds of life forms that we have not experienced. That is a continuous process in a field of infinity. There will always be more life to discover. The Hollywood version or the propaganda versions, the whole Hollywood movie ET invasion thing, is just about generating more fear consciousness. But it all begins within us and emanates from us. And that is where our capacity goes in order to have contact. My own journey, I've had physical contact with what I would call my star nations, not my embodied star nations on what I would call Earth, my embodied star nations in other dimensional realms. And in order to facilitate those experiences, I had to reach a certain point of love within myself, and a knowing of that love, and a knowing of that fearlessness, and testing that fearlessness over and over, and dissolving the fear into love by just challenging everyday mundane fears and realizing those fears weren't real. Are we really ready to challenge our experience of experiencing something so outside the box when we still reside in the fear about, do I have enough money in the bank, or, blah-de-blah? We're not ready. The adventure is right here, right now, in every moment. And it begins with us. And we can expand out to all of those things. And the more that we do, the more that we meet that collective state of Christ consciousness. And in an instant, all those single-celled organisms become the amoeba. And that's what the prophecies call the event. And when will that happen? Well, time doesn't exist. So we don't have to preoccupy ourselves with when and how. Let's preoccupy ourselves with who do I be in every moment. And like I say, become the Bruce Lee. Whoever lights us up as a master of the self. Be that. And all those other possibilities are then available.
It's a very beautiful answer once again. I dig it. And I love how you keep using Bruce Lee as well because, he's the guy I definitely choose. It was like my main inspiration. And you keep coming back to a very important point and addressing that is, who are you? What are you doing? There's like a Batman quote. It's like, what is it? It's like, it's not who I am on the inside. It's what I do that matters. And that's who you be, is what you're doing. And so what are you doing? You're doing something good, you're doing something bad, you're the judge of that. So just moving towards that. And I totally see the self-love piece is so interesting because that really is the journey. It's so interesting. I guess I'll just ask you, because I've asked a lot of guests this. I think that a lot of people live with shame and guilt and all this stuff that's on them like webs. Do you have any favorite ideas for reaching a high level self-love? To an experiment people could try for this is look in the mirror and say, I love you. And out of a scale of a 1 to 100, how much do you feel that? And, I've had guests on the show that say they feel it 100%. I don't think they're kidding. I don't think I think at sometimes I can feel it 100%. I also think that I'm a terrible critic to myself and, I should be doing more, should be doing this and that. And so if you have any advice on that, I would be curious to hear what you have.
It's another great question. And in the gene keys, our 22nd gene is where all the keys of the mechanics of ascension are hidden. So it's a very important gene for all of us. And it's all about embracing our suffering. If we push away our shadow, if we push away our suffering, as religion is taught, just go to the light, push away the shadow. That's actually a separation consciousness. In order to come into our wholeness and transcend the 6 core wounds, and I always say to people, like, write these down, keep them in your phone. The moment you're triggered, go to the list. Guilt, shame, denial, suppression, rejection, separation. Those are the 6 core wounds that overlight that final thing we call fear. And they're part of this human experience. They're part of the mechanics of the human experience. We have to overcome each and every one of them in order to activate the mechanics of our ascension process, which is coded in these physical bodies. So whenever we're triggered, go to the list. Instantly we'll go, oh my God, a shame. I see it. I see it right there. Then expand it out and just take a quick look and go, where else does shame play in my life? And then we go, oh my God, it plays out in every area of my life. So now we go, oh, I got to work with this thing. So I share something simple with everyone. We have 2 hemispheres of our brain and they don't work together. They work in what's called brain dominance, unless we have a balanced brainwave state like whales and dolphins. Whales and dolphins live in a whole brain state, which is why they're so intelligent. In order to get these 2 hemispheres of the brain, the actual mechanics of the physical body working, if we cross our ankles, just like that, clasp our hands together, cross our wrists over top of each other and cross our ankles, close our eyes and deep breathe in the moment of stress. And just hold that until we experience a shift. Then open our eyes, come back into the time and space moment that we're in. We can place our hands on our heart. We can hold our fingertips together. We can do anything that brings both of the hands together, gets a connection back to the physicality. We look around time and space where we are in this moment. Those hemispheres rebalance. If we have to do it 100 times a day, do it 100 times a day, because like exercising a muscle, the brain hemispheres are going to get stronger and they're going to start to work as a unified field. And as they do, we're going to experience more love for ourselves and all of life. It's that simple. When the hemispheres of the brain are out of balance, we perceive chaos, we feel chaos, and we create chaos. Just that simple technique I share with everyone, and everyone says, thank you. It's so simple. It's why yoga is so powerful, because in yoga we do all these crossovers and we deep breathe and we hold the crossovers. Same thing. Ancient wisdom. Simple. So in order to come into more self-love, any techniques, maybe someone goes for a run, that moves both sides of the body, gets those hemispheres working as one. As we're doing those processes, we can do the crossovers and just go, I love and accept myself. I still love and accept myself no matter what. We can add a positive phrase to it, because once the hemispheres are balanced, it gives us direct access to the unconscious mind, which we can call the hard drive, and we can instantly reprogram that hard drive. And the more we keep going to that glitch in the hard drive, all of a sudden one day some health issue we always had. For me, as I started to learn these techniques, I always had digestive issues. And then one day I was like, oh, I don't have a big bloated stomach. My stomach doesn't hurt anymore. It came because I was now balancing the hemispheres of my brain, and the whole system was coming back into balance. Those negative thoughts that we tell ourselves are actually a collective sea of thought consciousness. It's a practice over and over and over. We are the caretaker of our garden within. Just give those negative thoughts over. Go within, do a meditation, create a gardener, make a gardener in that garden. And every time a negative thought comes, give it to the gardener. Let the gardener deal with it, and then come back to the center of our garden, knowing that the master gardener is taking care of the garden, is taking care of all those negative thoughts. It's just like excess aphids on the rose leaves. But my master gardener knows how to he's an aphid whisperer. He knows how to tell the aphids, you're welcome to stay, but you can't all suck the life force out of these leaves on the roses. If you're going to stay, you're going to have to make yourself useful and spread yourself around. And while he's taking care of the gardening, I'm back in the center of the garden, holding the stillness. So assign a task maker inside of you, whatever kind of task maker resonates. And when you have a negative thought, now you have an internal friend to give that to, that you can trust. And sometimes, I mean, I make all these metaphors, but another one that came to me that was so funny was I would have a negative thought and it would spiral out, and I go, oh my God, that's going to create negativity. Now I let it go too far. And then my internal gardener would just say, no, that's just like chickens getting out of the yard. Just call those chickens home. And so I would tell my master gardener within, oh, I let the chickens out. And the master gardener would go out like a chicken whisperer, bring the chickens home. And so I wouldn't even have to worry about that ripple creating negativity or some experience I didn't want to have. It's all about playing creativity. The more we open our heart and ask for help, the more creative thoughts are going to come to us. How to distill all of this until we finally one day land in that stillness and silence, and we are unmovable. And it's a reality.
Okay. Wow. Again, every single time you have a message has been hitting them out of the park. This is amazing. I've heard about the mental gardener quite a bit. Not the gardener, but tending to your garden, right? It's very common in Buddhism, and I like that you touched on it, that it's a practice. It's, you don't just perfect it like anything. It's just that most people never start the practice is the thing. And so then, those thoughts and those feelings begin to take root, and they manifest and they grow, and when you can begin to tend to your garden, then you will begin to change what you experience on the outside 100%. And I've done meditations in sports and helping people. There's so many interesting things that you can do with your subconscious mind and the way that you just visualize and play fun with it, because it's this random kind of hypercomputer. And so you can get really good with it, and whatever feels good, so one of the things you keep bringing up, Bruce Lee, I have an advisory board, and if I'm, I got Bruce Lee, Jesus, Buddha, and then there's some other people in there, right? And so if I need to call on some energy, or if I need to whatever, I can be, in this circle of this advisory board, and it could be even, I don't know, a Power Ranger or a Jedi or whatever you want, but you're touching on the frequency of as you understand it, and that's what you're connecting to is the energy. And so, I was having this discussion with my brother that when you call in like an energy like Jesus or Buddha or anything, it's an energy as you understand it. So if I die and you think about me and you call my energy in, it was just how you remembered experiencing me. And ideally, when we talk about holding space and what's important, they talk about it in festivals a lot. What is your space like to be around? And I hope that my space is kind and it's loving and it's supportive to the best of my ability. And that's what I focus on, and that's what I can control. So I think they're all really interesting concepts that weave together and ultimately get back to that road of, loving yourself completely. And you're touching a lot on meditation, which is super important, because without meditation, you don't have the awareness of what's going on in your garden. You don't know what's growing. You don't know who's there. You don't know if you family of squirrels, right? You don't know what's going on. You got to figure that out. So there's some fundamental things you need to get into. We've been talking for a long time. I could talk to you for probably 20